So hello and welcome to the Advancing Global EDU's Reaching Forward 2020 online seminar. We've designed today's program to give you new insights and actionable strategies related to sales, marketing, and global growth strategies for education. Our goal is to consider different educational business, the educational business climate due to the pandemic, and to give your business a new way to thrive in the new normal. My name is Mike Campbell. I'm the president here at Advancing Global EDU, and I'm your moderator and presenter for the first session for today's track. And today's track in section C is we'll be discussing product marketing, and we'll explore new ways of marketing and product management in the new normal. At Advancing Global EDU, we're experienced sales and marketing and product management professionals with years of experience in the education industry. We're poised to help you overcome challenges presented by the COVID-19 pandemic and ways to turn these challenges into opportunities. Contact us to help you during this time. We're happy to give you a complimentary consultation during this time, so feel free to reach out to us. Before we get started, we want to share a couple of quick details for you. All of our sessions will be recorded, and we'll provide a recording and the slides to all attendees. So you'll receive a follow-up email from us next Tuesday. During the presentation, please feel free to submit your questions in the chat window, and we'll leave enough time at the end so that we can have a Q&A at the end. And if you encounter any technical questions, feel free to put those in the browser. And Barbara, I'll ask if you can give me a heads up if you get that. So stop me if anybody has that, and let me know, and I can try to help them during that. A lot of times, as you know, if you try to refresh your browser, that usually works. One of us will respond to any of your technical questions if you submit those, though. Okay? We're active on social media, and we hope you'll follow us. We'll be tweeting during the webinar today using the hashtag Reaching Forward 2020, and we encourage you to join us. Our Twitter name is Advancing EDU. So with that, let's get started. So let me just change my slides here. Share again. Are you seeing my slides there? Barbara, are you seeing my slides? You're on mute. You have to unmute yourself. Barbara, can you see my slides? Okay. I'm going to take you off mute so that if There. So if you need to talk to me, feel free to speak up, okay?
Yeah, thanks, Michael.
Yeah. I'm going to redo this.
Okay, now we're seeing great, Michael.
Okay, great. So let me start this. Okay, do you see my slide now?
We do.
Okay, great. So our first session is really on content marketing and marketing in the, for the new pandemic era. You know, you've heard it 100 times. COVID-19 has changed everything. In the weeks, months, and years to come, we've even seen more clearly how it's, we'll see even more clearly how it's disrupted our world and changed our behavior. The marketing world is by no means exempt from how it will have changed everything. And it probably be a good long while before we'll have a good reckoning of how the pandemic has impacted the education industry. So, you know, we're still trying to figure out remote learning, you know, how the impact of it has done for the closing of schools. You know, a lot of schools have not even figured out what's going to happen for reopening. And then you have budgets on top of that with everything that's going on with that. And what that means for our efforts to drive leads and awareness is anything but figured out for a lot of companies, and where we're going from there. With that being said, content marketing becomes more important for many companies and for our industry. In my opinion, traditional marketing and sales has got to change. But before we get started, let me tell you, you know, just a little bit about me. I consider myself to be an industry connector. I have 25 years in the industry. I started teaching in a high school in Louisiana right out of college, and then moved into educational publishing. I worked in marketing management for McGraw-Hill, Cengage, and at Pearson. While I was at Pearson, I was promoted and became the VP of Pearson Canada, and lived and worked in Toronto for about 9 years. After that, I came back to Chicago and I worked in the K-12 library industry, and then worked in a startup before starting my own consulting company about 4 years ago. In my spare time, I do some volunteer work with the local library. I work with the Illinois Library Systems. I'm on their board. I'm on the Girl Scouts of Northern Illinois board, and on the local parent-teacher organization board. So I stay busy most of the time. We've probably seen this a lot too. During times of uncertainty, people turn to organization and brands that they trust most. When schools began to shut down, our industry overwhelmingly turned out for our customers. You've probably seen several databases out there with close to 1,000 free solutions available for schools and districts to take advantage of as they move to remote learning. And we've seen the rhetoric around remote learning promoting solutions to help teachers, schools, and districts. And now things are opening up. It's time to start to rethink your marketing strategies to make sure that you'll thrive in a post-COVID world. So as we start to move into our agenda, you know, let's, you know, we've talked about lots about making the most of what you have, but these days we're inundated with voices, you know, from the news, voices from politicians, voices from the medical profession. And at times, it's really hard to know who to listen to or who to trust. the most successful companies will be those that develop a reputation for clear, candid, and honest connections with teachers, administrators, parents, and content marketing and thought leadership create that connection. So, what we want to talk about here for the next 20 or so minutes is really about really making the most of what you have, the tactics for those success, and then how do you thrive in this new environment? And then we'll end up with some questions at the very end. So let me see if I can, in a matter of weeks, everything that we have known has changed, right? No more traditional conferences, and the big conferences like ISTE, ASCD, NSTA, all of those, they may have been rescheduled. Some of those have been rescheduled for the fall. ISTE is rescheduled for November. Will educators be willing to travel to those conferences? Will there be budgets for those conferences? I've recently heard a story of a company's vice president of marketing who was asked to give up her conference budget to help the company's loss of sales. And she had the foresight to negotiate with her CEO for a good portion of that to reinvest in other marketing efforts. And her argument for that was, how are we going to get leads? How are we going to get conversions? Which are all good arguments, because otherwise, how are you going to continue your, your business of driving sales at the end? The schools and district offices closed. Many of you have, invested heavily into sales forces that are now sidelined. These talented men and women hopefully can turn their skills to closing closing via phone and online. Another expense for many companies, which has been very successful over the years, have been, having events at conferences and doing things like lunch and learns, which are all in-person events, which we can't do anymore. And they've been great lead generators because you've been able to get lots of attendees to come to those events. And then there's physical collateral, catalogs, postcards, and with no one at schools to receive those, and even if there were, people are reticent to get those items now because of the virus that's there. When we start talking about the new norm, you start thinking about, what's that going to look like? Educators have always been wary of being advertised to. And I think they will be a little bit more arguably being ready more than ever to hear stories from us, which will help us to emphasize and to make sense of some of this chaotic world that we're living in. Content marketing is one of the best ways for education companies to tell our stories. Stories of, who we are, who we serve, and the value that we bring every day to educators, to parents, to administrators. More than anything else, we're poised for success because we meet our customers where they are. Surely, we'll likely reach a point where teachers, administrators are back in classrooms, back in their offices, and they'll be back at conferences, and people will be ready to travel again. But, until that time, people will still need to occupy their time, with their devices. And we've seen that over and over, webinars, and they want the convenience of a phone and a tablet and other device to get the information that they are looking for. And they're looking for that in their favorite brands in education, and they're trying to discover new information in the world of remote learning. Content marketing provides that way to engage them, to inform them, and to win their attention, and ultimately to gain their trust. Feel free, as we're going along here, to put your questions in the chat box on the side, and we're going to get to the end. We'll go back and Barbara can help me capture those at the end. When we start talking about tactical things, according to one study, America will need about, excuse me, $41 billion, or an additional 5% of the entire education budget that we spend to cover out things like remote learning, expanded food service, to cover cost of teachers, to make up time for all the time that we've lost in the last 3 months. And knowing the economic challenges that we face right now, most districts and most places across the country will not have that choice. So they're going to have to make some hard choices in the coming year and years. So we're suggesting you have to shift your energies. It's not figure out why you are better. It's no longer good enough to be big, better, or brighter. Administrators need you and need your help to figure out why you are better and how you can solve their problem. We often talk about companies having a must-have solution or versus having a product that's a nice-to-have. If you have a nice-to-have solution, it's time to pivot and make that a must-have solution. And now's the time to do that. And use content marketing to show how your product or solution can solve that administrator's problem. This is your chance to be innovative, be creative, and to understand how your customer can how you can better than ever understand your customer's need. If you have almost having a startup mindset, if you can turn on a dime and make those agile decisions very quickly, that will help you identify those new problems and solve those problems very quickly. So we talked briefly about the pre-COVID marketing landscape. Now let's talk about post-COVID lockdown landscape and how you can recalibrate your efforts to maintain your share of voice and relevancy. One of the key things of doing that, and we've talked about this all along, has been content marketing. And when you talk about content marketing, have some marketing goals in mind. When you're using venues like Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, etc., the support that you've given your customers through these, hard times, focus on building long-term trust and educating your customers on building solutions engaging your customers in creative ways, even entertaining your customers so that they can have a good time, and in the education industry, frankly, we do very little entertaining of our customers. We really focus a lot on thought leadership, on all these other things, but very little of entertaining there. But in today's world, if you start talking about sales, though, sales forecasts for the coming year, oh my goodness, they've ultimately been eliminated. How many companies are just scrambling just to stay above water? with or without COVID, sales is always in an ever-changing game. What worked during one quarter may not work the next. There's constant new strategies. That being said, I think that, we're moving back to a more humanized version of sales, one that we're focusing on more of relationship building at its core. And people want to connect more than ever. And they're really unlikely to give, sales reps the time of day to people that they don't trust. So remember back when, at the very beginning, when we talked about in times of uncertainty that people go to brands that they trust? This really speaks to that. So when you're planning during this for the rest of the year, I really think that you should really start thinking about, building relationships and working on ways to do that with your sales team. I have a hard time believing also, speaking of sales, that once those outside salespeople get a taste of the amount of success that they can achieve using only their phones and computers, that wasting their time traveling to clients' locations, all of their time will be inside sales. Especially when they can, use platforms like LinkedIn, Zoom, Teams, things like that. And, and while it may take a special person to drive a relationship online, it really, if they can learn those skills and quickly, they'll be successful. Webinars is another key one that you can drive voice and relevancy in the new post-COVID lockdown. Remote working and learning has taught us that that there's real power in webinars. 73% of sales and marketing managers say that this is the best lead generator. And with the average length of webinars only being 61 minutes, webinars are pretty engaging if you have the right speaker or speakers. And the current technology, you can have panel presentations, product demos, and thought leadership out there. And ultimately, they generate pretty high quality leads. We know planning and promoting a webinar is pretty difficult. And it's, and if you've never done it before, our team of experienced experts here at Advancing Global is able to help you find the right options for your team, to help you get those leads that you want. And ultimately, the old standby email marketing still drives tons of leads. Email marketing, previously, lots of companies have used the shotgun method of segmentation, which has been a pretty crude form of fishing for leads. Most of the time it's been based on geography and sometimes things like titles. Before the crisis, we were starting to see that change come about. And now more education marketers are making use of behavioral data to create predictive models that build segments based on customer needs, which you'll see more and more of that happening. So at Advancing Global EDU, we really say you need to focus. And as marketing strategies change in the new normal, we say take and adopt an all-market approach. So in the new normal, without traditional feet on the street and without face-to-face conferences, you have to take an all-market approach, which means taking advantage of new digital marketing approaches to the market and being more efficient using those platforms. You want to put your customer at the center of your business, which most everybody thinks that they have, but post-coronavirus, education businesses will need to do a deep calibration of how customers make decisions, because this has changed everything. Education companies will need to rethink those decision journeys to understand what educators now value and design new use cases and how educators experience those insights. So think about, remote learning and how they've used remote learning and how parents have experienced remote learning. That means a more nuanced approach to segmenting customers. As part of that, we have, I think, as an industry, done a lot of work in thought leadership. And I'll say this, this is just my opinion, but I think that we've been somewhat ambitious on thought leadership. In the last, 2 to 3 months, we've kind of put aside a lot of thought leadership. And we've been much more helpful in connecting with people, offering them something of value, being much more connecting with people. And I think this is somewhat, much more liberating. We've, started to connect with people as people much more. And suddenly it's okay to not have such a, quote, marketing message. And it's okay to be useful and to be empathetic and to be, talking about what's worth it. So shifting your message from being audience pursuit to being mission-based strategy becomes more important. As part of that, it still becomes more important that you still gain new customers, and a way to do that is to do things like paid search. And according to Google, they bring in 2 times more than you pay in by doing that. That's a pretty good return on that. Things like mobile search has increased from before the pandemic from 2 hours a day to now 3 hours a day. And a lot of that is being driven by millennials and Gen Zers about the time that they're spending online. So, and again, going back to email is still one of your best ROIs. A multi-touch email campaign can still give you a ton of good return on your money. According to HubSpot, the average open rate in the education industry is 25%, which is one of the highest of all industries. But make sure you think about how you can contribute, how you can lead and support, added value. Talk about your webinars, talk about insights, think about that. And then social media. Before the pandemic, approximately 60% of Facebook and YouTube users said their usage of the platforms would increase during the pandemic. And guess what? It did. Facebook usage is up 27%. YouTube usage is up 15%. And TikTok usage is up for adults over 25 by 15%. LinkedIn is by far your best professional platform. With over 165 million users in the US alone, During the pandemic, they have seen a 26% increase in sessions. And if you haven't seen, some of the sessions there, they continue to see an increase as people network and take advantage of the platform for job opportunities and new learning skills. Educators are always want references, as you well know, and white papers present a compelling and useful way of solving that problem. This is a great conversation tool to get market qualified leads, and it's a different approach to to get those, as well as case studies. Case studies is a genuine form of showing how successful your product is without saying so yourself. Customer testimonials are another one, and you can always put those on your website. Those are great for your website there. Public relations. Everyone, online now, it's important to know that the media outlets that your audience turn to for information, are they on a national news outlet or is it education specific? Getting your message out to the right publication is key. So, and then also developing relationship with those editors and freelance journalists out there is also key to successful public relations campaigns too. As well, also online content, blog posts, we talked about webinars, podcasts, on webinars. Let me just say this, if you, our partner at edweb.net, great group, already known by customers. If they, if you have a compelling solution, they can help you get to the customers that you want in a very large and wide audience. Podcast, and again, a great way that you can use those, post those to your website, and you can, use that as another way to, get that on your website, post that, partner with somebody to interview that. Recorded podcasts can be housed on your website and you can feature interviews, stories, case studies as a conversation. It can, you can repost that on social media via email and it draws people to your website. I'm sure lots of you have educational themed podcasts. Some of you may even have your own. Feel free to put that in the chat if you have one. I've partnered with Larry Jacobs. Some of you may know him at Educational Talk Radio to do a podcast. And like I said, once you do one of those, you can put it on your own website and it can become part of your marketing strategy. It's important that you thrive. There's so many of our colleagues and other companies that are really just getting by during this time, and we want you to thrive. Previous research that shows that consumers are happy to hear from brands during the pandemic, but now they want to hear about something other than the pandemic. And they want to hear in the next week, next month, or next year. So let's talk about how to thrive in the next new normal. It's an ongoing process, so get comfortable with change. 56% of marketers say managing shifting priorities or strategies is one of the main challenges at the moment. but yet they lack the bandwidth to do that. You know, the other piece of this is our customers expect to see us act as we behave. So brand behavior matters more than ever. As businesses and individuals will be remembered for how we show up, how we respond to the crisis, and that means to the needs of others. So time and time again, we have seen education companies step up and provide for the community, and hopefully it'll be remembered in the long run. And so, and then finally, you know, enormous change is afoot. You know, this is not going back to the pre-COVID time. As the lockdown continues and the market changes, we'll continue to pivot, and flexing of your strategies will be essential. Things are moving fast right now, so agility is king. For marketing leaders, it's all about staying the course, and what I mean by that is continue to build awareness. Do not stop marketing. Continue with your content marketing strategies and your lead generation strategies. You know, we're going to continue to move towards recovery, and it's going to be noisy out there. So you're going to have to get above the noise. So your marketing strategy will need to be more robust than ever. You know, one of the other things about that, when I say that it's going to have to, you know, cut through the noise, is that you're going to have to generate content that is more valuable to your customer. And you need to keep the end in mind, and that there's been plenty of folks who have made mistakes. They've produced content that has been perceived to be tone deaf. They've, you know, we've heard anecdotally of schools whose leaders have blackballed companies because of their lack of sensitivity during the pandemic, and they're bull in the china shop because of their sales, you know? So you want to keep the end in mind here. You want to make sure that your team and your company understand what the goal is here. Think about your competition. When was the last time you performed a competitive analysis? You know, what's working for your competitors? What's not? And then why did your customers buy from you? Not only will this be great info for your content, as you build content stories, but this will be great for your product management team also. And then finally, data. You know, are you reporting and getting the proper ROI from your marketing efforts? You know, when there's so much budgetary challenges out there, now more than ever, you know, having the reports out there can help you pivot quickly. You know, we're living in uncharted waters, so make sure your marketing fundamentals are supported by data. Okay, so I was quick and I ran through that quickly, and so I will, and we are questions. And do we have any questions, Barbara?
Can you hear me, Michael?
Yep.
There were a couple of questions. One specifically was about defining how this is different. Specifically, you know, in a really short nutshell, what is it that people should change in their marketing?
Really, you know, when we did the research on this, we felt like what was different was that the number one thing is that people felt that it was being mission-minded versus, I guess the word is audience-minded. And that is that when you are looking at your more customer-centric, I guess is the way to say that.
Okay, thank you for that. We didn't really have a lot of other questions. There was one little concerned that the audio wasn't quite loud enough for one particular person, but I haven't seen more than that in the chat. So if your audio is challenging to you, if you could add your question or concern about that in the chat so we could try to adjust it on our end, on the presenter's end, rather than trying to have you mess about with your local controls. Another challenging point that came up in the chat is when we talk about the disruption to the education that kids are actually getting, do you think that we're targeting the right user? You know, and I guess, should we be more learner-centric than teacher-centric? That's another way to think about it. I'm not sure that that's a perfect answer. And I would certainly guess, Michael, that you'll tell me it depends on the business that you're trying to do.
I think that, you know, we've all seen that with parents involved, parents have played a huge mix in the pandemic here and with students, you know.